So today I want to talk a little bit about something that I see that seems to be happening pretty much everywhere I look with regards to those who are experiencing something with the divine. So some people seem to be connected, right? And that's the way it's always been. And there are people who are still not connected. They maybe are caught away with in the pursuit of personal property or the pursuit of material things. There's also people who are kind of in a state of darkness, maybe because something went wrong in childhood, and it's like they can't really bring themselves to think of God or of anything, any higher power beyond themselves, because something's broken. It's like it doesn't add up. So there's all sorts of people, but there are those who seem connected. There's a light in their eyes. They are searching for something. And you find these people everywhere. You find them within the religious frameworks, and you find them outside of religious frameworks. The surprising thing to me is that it seems to be moving outward. And that throughout history there's been spiritual movements. There have been times when that spirit, that energy, that life force, so to speak, which moves from the unseen world, has moved upon people. And many of the religious frameworks that exist today are remnants of spiritual movements, of the spirit moving, of a revelatory power which has kind of parted the veil and opened the heavens, so to speak, at times in the past, right? And the founders of many of those movements were deeply connected to the divine. They saw things that other people didn't see. They understood things that other people didn't understand, and they tried to convey what they saw. Of course, each movement is some are brighter, some are only fragments of the whole. Well, I shouldn't even say that. All you could say are fragments of the whole. That's just the nature of this life. But the strange thing today is that it seems to be on the outside. It makes me think about a parable in the Bible where Jesus says that what he would do is he would invite everybody to the feast, and that those who were invited wouldn't come, and so he'd go out into the streets. He'd send his servants out into the streets to gather those that were in the streets. And I seem to see nowadays that where the heart of spiritual movement is happening is on the outside or on the outskirts. Oftentimes when I speak to people who are still within a religious framework, those who I can have the best and brightest and most kind of enlivened conversation with are those who are not really at the center of those faiths. Oftentimes it seems to be more and more that many of those who are the staunch believers in any framework seem to be the ones that are least open to spiritual experiences. The minute that you begin to talk about some sort of experience you've had with the divine, they immediately begin to tell you why that is not that's not possible. Well, that can't be because of this, or that can't, that couldn't have happened because, it says right here in the Bible that such a da-da-da-da-da, or it says right here in you name the spiritual book, and so it's really strange. It's a time in which I've never, I don't know that I ever would have guessed that it would be so surprisingly evident that it's like that those who are invited to the feast, those who are most stalwart are the least likely to partake in spiritual things. Isn't that strange? Those who have spent their lives defending the faith and trying to be good and trying to stay close to the fire of the faith are the ones who are least likely to accept any sort of spiritual experience. If somebody is actually having an experience with the divine, they're the most likely to be met with skepticism and even rejection and a verbal type of persecution because of what they're experiencing. A few years ago, when I wrote a book in 2016, and I sent a copy of it to somebody. Oh goodness, I was going to tell who it was. Anyways, this author wrote. Now I can't tell it. So, this author wrote a book. The reason I'm saying I can't is because he asked me specifically not to mention his name. But anyways, he and I ended up conversing through email for a little bit. But he wrote a very popular book, and he'd written a final chapter at the time that he wrote it years ago. It's you kind of call it a New Age type book, and anyways, the last chapter he couldn't publish at the time because it didn't make any sense, and then he published the last chapter, and I just read his revised edition with the new chapter, when I had finished my book, and we ended up discussing it a little bit. And in the last chapter, it described a world where, that is exactly like what I was just describing, where those who are closest to the faith, it's become hollow, and it's just all just words, and that this being from the divine was returning to help somebody, and the person they were coming to help was somebody on the outside, somebody who had tried all of the things they talked about in his religious upbringing and discovered them to be false. And so he was getting ready to end his life, and then this being from the divine shows up to actually show him the spiritual way, the way that leads to an actual life and experience with the divine. So isn't that strange? But that's where I think we are. And if you're listening to this, the likelihood is that you understand what I'm talking about, can relate. But I'm grateful. I'm grateful that there is a way that's been opened up, and I think it's providential. It's intended, because I believe that this last movement will show us that a person's religion, so to speak, that a person's relationship with the divine is extremely personal, that it is individual. And it's something I think, well, really, I know I've believed, I think, for a long time. It's like, you can go to any church or any synagogue or whatever, and they're not all of one religion. There is many religions in that place as there are people, and it's just something we've never really acknowledged, but that's what it's coming to. And we have a strange unity in our diversity of experience. We're all experiencing something slightly different, but when we get together, we invariably discover that it feels the same. It may not sound the same, but it has the same ring of truth to it when it's authentic and it's a real experience with the divine. And I think that that's the only thing that gives hope for the world that we live in is, if each of us are listening to the conductor, and one may be an oboe and another is a clarinet and another is a trombone, but we play in harmony. So I'm kind of amazed that it's like the whole world has a part to play, and that there might be as many parts, as many instruments as there are people. I can't even imagine what that sounds like. But that's where I think we're going. That's the thing that's going to bring the new earth. A new heaven and a new earth. And and it's not a work of man. It's not a work of man. We're not following a man, really. I mean, that's not been the old framework. It's the way it's always been. And it seems like that's even the way that the divine has interacted with people, as it's been, one person here and a person there. And that individual had a connection, and then the people had a connection with that individual. It's the old story of Moses going up on the mountain, right? He goes up on the mountain and he wants the people to come, but they won't come because it's too scary. So Moses ends up being this intermediary between God and the people. But it's not that way. It's not going to be that way anymore. It's like the keys are turning back. The keys are being returned to God and to the divine, to Christ, to reign. So, wow. And that surprises me. That's all I have to share today. God bless you all.